Hello, I'm Janice Karen, Director of Policy, Technology, and Innovation at the Massachusetts Health Data Consortium, or MHDC. I run our Data Governance Collaborative, also known as the DGC. We start each of our weekly meetings with a series of industry quick updates to learn about new and proposed regulations, laws, standards, industry initiatives, and other activity. Join us for this week's updates. So the first update is that ONC has released a draft 2024 to 2030 Federal Health IT Strategic Plan. This is open for comment through May 28th, and I haven't looked at it in excruciating detail yet, but there's basically 4 major goals for the program, and each of them has several objectives at the high level, and then they go in and talk about all of this in more detail. So the first goal is to promote health and wellness. But you'll see that even though that sounds like a very general goal, a lot of this is health IT focused. So the things that are underneath there are things that are around patient access to data and being able to get modern care and equity. So even though some of these may sound a little bit more general, they're really looking at them from the health IT lens. The second goal is to enhance delivery and experience of care. And again, here, it's things like expanded access, equity, having more transparency. They call out providers specifically on reduced regulatory and administrative burden, which is somewhat interesting. And then the thing that I thought was very interesting here is using health IT with confidence, because that has a lot of components. That requires training, that requires education, that requires confidence that things are working smoothly, that requires a lot of transparency. And I think that's an interesting objective, and I think it will be really interesting to see what they have planned there and the areas that they focus on under there. I think will say a lot about what they're planning to do and how they're planning to approach health IT in this period. So there's two more goals with their objectives on the next slide. But before I move on to them, anyone have any thoughts or questions or things they want to ask about or address here? All right, then I'll go on to the second half of this. So the third goal is to accelerate research and innovation. And again, here it's things like making sure researchers have appropriate access to health data. But they used appropriate advisedly, because it's not just more access. There's also privacy issues there and consent issues around that. And so that really is appropriate access is really the goal. Being able to enhance the research through health IT, and again, promoting health equity. You'll see that everything really focuses. They say there's 4 goals, but there's sort of 2 uber goals, which are better health IT systems and better health equity. And then, so the fourth goal is connecting the health system with health data. So this one's clearly directly interoperability. But clear and shared expectations for data sharing across the entire industry. That seems like a really good goal. Making sure that infrastructure needed to support health IT is available to all. Again, that electronic health information is protected, private, and secure. And then also integrating the healthcare system with public health and making that really be a flowing, integrated system. So I thought these were interesting. There's nothing too terribly surprising here, but I think the devil's in the details, and we'll take a deeper look at this at some point. Anyone have any comments on these 2 goals or the whole thing in general? All right, then let's move on. So there's a new rule out from HHS, Department of the Treasury, and Department of Labor that places restrictions on short-term limited duration insurance plans, and also imposes new educational requirements for fixed indemnity plans. excuse me, there were some other proposed changes for fixed indemnity plans, but they did not finalize them in this rule. They're considering them for future rulemaking. So effective on September 1st of this year, short-term limited duration insurance plans can only be issued for a 3-month period, and they can only last for 4 months. That's obviously with an extension. At the current time, they can be issued for a year and be extended up to 3 years. So they're really turning this into short term. And they also put in a limitation that it's not a new plan for this purpose if there's a new contract. Apparently, this is a practice called stacking that's very common. So people end up on these quote unquote short term limited duration plans forever because they just write it as a new contract that with an identical plan. And then on the fixed indemnity plans, you have to highlight how they're different from comprehensive coverage with across a wide variety of documents that get spelled out. So there's a fact sheet available on the CMS website, and the full rule is available in the Federal Register. So I don't know if any of you work with any of these plans, but be aware that some of the rules around them are changing. Anyone have any comments or thoughts or questions there? All right. So there's also a final rule around the application, eligibility determination, enrollment, and renewal processes for Medicaid, CHIP, and the basic health program. And these are basically meant to make it easier to apply for folks who are older or disabled, and also impose some standards around timeframes for responses, and the types of documentation and records that have to be stored around eligibility. The other thing that they did here is you can't require people to apply for other benefits to be eligible for Medicaid. So I know there are a lot of states that have various rules that you can only apply for Medicaid if you do A, B, C, or D. Some of those may need to be revisited. I don't believe Massachusetts has anything, but I'm not 100% sure. So that's something to pay attention to if you're doing Medicaid plans. And then if you do any CHIP coverage, they've removed the annual and lifetime limits on the amount of coverage that's possible. So again, there's a fact sheet, and apparently the link to the full rule is not on the slide. I apologize for that. It's probably linked on the fact sheet. And if not, if anyone wants it, feel free to shoot me an email and I will supply it. And I will also make a note to add it to follow up next time. All right. So, all right, let's move on. So the FTC has put out a report that looks at the state of privacy and data security activity in 4 areas: artificial intelligence, health privacy, children's privacy, and geolocation data. All, for the most part, things that we all care about and talk about. And what's interesting about this report is that it's one of the few places where I've seen them talk about relevant enforcement actions and rulemaking in the same place. So, it talks about the proposed update to the health data breach notification rule that we talked about last year. It also talks about the rulemaking that cracks down on surveillance and lax data security practices. But at the same time, it points out enforcement actions that it's taken in relevant areas that are related to those rules. So I thought this was kind of an interesting, even though there's nothing new or exciting in there, I thought it was a really useful way to present the information. So you can find a press release with a link to the actual report in the slide. Any questions or thoughts there? All right. The FDA has put out a report on AI, and I can't actually see the rest of the heading, but there's 4 major areas in the report. As you can see, I'm not going to read them all, but it really talks about the activity that they're planning in these areas and things that they think are important. And so they're talking about things like monitoring and evaluating trends, um, trying to develop standardized methodology for evaluating algorithms, issuing guidance on AI-enabled software functions. Remember that software can be considered a medical device by the FDA. So it's not this doesn't just cover physical devices that may have some AI embedded in them, but actual applications that use AI that don't have any physical component to them at all can still be covered by the FDA medical device rules. So there was nothing earth-shattering here, but it was really interesting seeing some of this laid out. And I think in general, this is a good thing and a good thing to look at, and it will work in conjunction with all of the other AI guidance and regulatory activity happening in HHS. So any questions or comments or thoughts there? All right. I hope you learned a lot from our quick updates. If you're interested in finding out more about the DGC and its other activities, email me at dgc@myhealthdata.org. Email address is also on your screen.